Thanks so much for joining us today on Connect and Collaborate, where we come together each day to introduce you to our network of business and community leaders and to discuss the important issues that impact business in Colorado and the region. I'm Tammy Schaefer, your on-air producer, and today we are connecting with Vital for Colorado. Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado, is here to help host the show. Peter, great to see you.
Well, thanks a lot, Tammy. I'm so happy to be here. And our guest today is Alice Jackson, who's the Vice President, Regional Vice President for Strategic Revenue Initiatives. Sounds very hip for Xcel Energy. And Xcel Energy, along with its affiliates in 8 states, they provide your electricity. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
We'll talk about various things, but before we start, want a little intro to you, a little bit intro to your technical background, which I find fascinating, and what Xcel does. You know, people just turn the power on, and if it turns on, then Xcel is doing its job, and people don't really appreciate what is necessary to keep the power running cheap, affordable, and plentiful.
Well, I think fortunately for customers, they have that option of being able to turn that light switch on and have that power automatically. And it's very rarely that you don't have that opportunity to see that light come on whenever you do flip the switch. But it is very complicated. There are many systems behind that. There are over 11,000 employees for our company that are working every day very hard to make sure that we can deliver that reliable electricity to our customers so that they can enjoy the creature comforts that they like and to promote the businesses that we support.
Well, you know, people think of Xcel as being purely a Colorado company, but it's actually a regional company across 8 states. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the reach of Xcel?
Yeah, sure. So we really do serve a number of states here in the central United States, all the way from Upper Peninsula of Michigan into Minnesota, down through Colorado, Texas, and New Mexico, and then of course we have Wisconsin and North Dakota and South Dakota. So really that central part of the United States, quite a bit of service there. And we operate primarily as an investor-owned utility, which means we provide both the generation, the transmission, and the distribution components of electricity, which not all states do these days.
Right. So I think a monopoly, that's one of the good things known as one of the 4 utilities.
That's correct.
At least I always used to buy that. And how did you get into this work?
Not in a million years would I have expected to be working for an electric utility. But at the end of the day, I would say that I probably will spend the rest of my career in a utility just because of how interesting it is. But like I've said before, I think to you in one of our previous conversations is you usually don't go to college sitting there saying, I really want to graduate and go work for a utility. But at the end of the day, there isn't another business that you can be in that really touches as many lives as we touch on a daily basis, minute to minute, the base of the economy and everything else. So while my beginning wasn't in a utility, I was in a technical field. My degree is in management information systems. I was a geek. I was a computer programmer, still am to this day. Really enjoy those kinds of activities in the strategic analysis that goes into the analytics of programming. But it transitioned as the market was deregulating in Texas. I was working for an oil and gas company that electricity is the #1 feedstock of enhanced oil recovery. And so we really paid a lot of attention to that electricity bill as it came in from the utility. Xcel Energy got to know me through me intervening in their rate cases from that oil and gas company perspective and sitting across the table from them and negotiating against them in those rate cases from time to time. Ultimately,
sounds like Xcel recognized some talent over time.
Ultimately,
you can't beat them, get them to join you.
That's right. And that was the question ultimately that I was asked is instead of taking them apart, how would you like to come and put them together? And, you know, switching to the other side has been an eye-opening experience because even digging into those rate cases that really expose how the utility operates from the outside and looking in wasn't nearly as complicated as looking at it from the inside and trying to assemble that. So, you know, I'm glad that we're here talking today so that we can reveal some of those complexities to the listeners and to make sure that we can clear up and describe and educate a little bit around what that looks like.
Well, brief advertisement for Vital for Colorado. We're a nonprofit organization. We're an education and advocacy group. Been around for just over 4 years, and we are based on a 7 principles pledge, and one of our principles is all of the above energy.
Right.
And we truly believe that. And I think as you're about to explain during the next hour or so, we really need all of the sources of energy that are available and the source of energy that are available right now are symbiotic to each other.
Yes, so an electron from one resource is the same as an electron from the other. The question is what are the byproducts of those production? But really what we look at is we are looking at the economics of each of those different resources. And there's a difference between an intermittent resource and one that you can have more as dispatchable. And I'm sure we're going to get into all of that today.
Well, thank you very much. And then where else in, so Xcel's a major presence in the Denver metro area.
Yes, sir.
Where else in Colorado is Xcel present?
We actually reach to most of the corners of the state. So Grand Junction is a major service territory for us up in Greeley. We even serve natural gas down in the Pueblo area. So we serve over 60% of the state. And you know, that's quite, or I should say we serve over 60% of the population in the state. Right. And so that is, you know, really from corner to corner. And then even if we don't have the co-op is, you know, serving other areas, we do serve the co-ops in a large number of places, both their electricity needs and some of their transmission needs.
And I assume there are backup agreements if one of the co-ops needs energy in a certain time of the day, you're there to help them?
Yes, so we have very cooperative relationships between us, the cooperatives, and other municipals. And then also across the nation, we have the same thing. So we sent resources from Colorado all the way to Florida when the hurricanes came through earlier this year. And it's a very cooperative environment between the various utilities in order to make sure we can get the lights on and keep them on as much as we can for our customers.
And I just know this from casual reading. I'm not an expert in any way, but there's a lot more than just providing the quantity of electricity. It's also the right frequency. It needs to be a certain frequency, doesn't it?
That's correct. The United States grid operates at 60 hertz, and it's a very sensitive environment that you have to maintain. And just like we don't expect you to call us before you turn your lights on, we have to make sure we have the resources that can instantaneously respond.
And then some resources are more sensitive than other resources, such as anything involving, I guess, university research require very, very precise regulation.
That is correct.
Of the frequency.
Yes, absolutely. And even some of the other manufacturers we have in our area, you know, such as plastics manufacturers or high tech, they do require a very high quality of service.
Wonderful. We're talking today with Alice Jackson, Regional Vice President, Rates and Regulatory Affairs for Xcel Energy, along with Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado. We will be back with more here on Connect and Collaborate. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for staying with us here on Connect and Collaborate as we connect with Vital for Colorado. Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado, is helping lead the conversation.
Well, thanks a lot, Tammy. We're here with Alice Jackson from Xcel. She's the Vice President for Strategic Revenue Initiatives. And Alice, I'd like to turn our attention to our energy future. Everybody's focused on renewables and percentages, and many politicians are out there throwing numbers out. Various states are competing with each other with percentages. And last I read is that in terms of renewables, at least Colorado is currently around the 20% range. Is that close to being true?
That's roughly correct, yes, as far as from an energy perspective.
Right. And it means an energy production perspective?
That's correct. So
okay.
Capacity is how much is the installed capacity,
right.
How big are the facilities. Energy is how much do they produce over time.
Okay. And so there's a new initiative, and I've read the brochure on it. It's very impressive. Our energy future, and I'd like to, during this segment, explain what our energy future is. But before doing that, what is the underlying development that's occurring for our energy future?
Yeah, so the primary reason that we started developing the initiative that received the title at the end, Our Energy Future, is really the feedback we've been receiving from a variety of our stakeholders. I would classify that we have 4 primary stakeholders that we answer to as a regulated utility. Number one, of course, is our customers. What are their preferences? What are they looking for? What are their needs? What type of industry do we have in our areas? Because of my current team's responsibility for economic development across our 8 states, one of the things that we recognize is that there are 8 primary industry clusters across our 8 states.
That's right.
And they require certain types of electricity. They have certain sustainability goals. So what are those goals? And then converse to that, or complementary to that, are our residential customers. You know, what are they reading? What are they learning? How interested are they in their electricity? And, you know, what's driving them as far as, I really want to have more green energy versus it doesn't matter. And different states have different positions. Colorado, they have distinct opinions. And so when we were getting that feedback, it was we needed to make some changes and figure out how are we going to talk to our customers and really deliver on that promise long term of what they were looking for. The second category is our legislators. We've seen more and more energy bills as we go through the years, you know, interested in different aspects of the business, particularly around electricity. For us, we've been looking at different bills coming forward between renewable energy standards, how are you going to address the coal infrastructure that we do have in the state, and all of those things are driving decisions we're making internally in the company. Our third category of customers is our communities. You mentioned Denver earlier in our conversation. Denver's a big driver of, you know, some of the ways that we're looking at how are we going to integrate and satisfy their needs versus maybe some of the needs of our other cities that are a little bit smaller. And being able to meet all of those different needs collectively, we have to take those into consideration.
And two other factors that occur to me is what physical resources are available in Colorado, and how fortunate Colorado is to have those resources, and also the economic opportunity of production tax credits, which
Yes.
I think are expiring this year in terms of starting and need to complete construction by 2018. So those two factors also, I think, combine to create a very good opportunity to do what?
All kinds of things. So we really are blessed here in Colorado to have an all of the above methodology that we can adopt. We have great resources for natural gas. We have great resources for the wind because our wind blows very strongly on the eastern plains, and we have great solar intensity, so we can build solar resources here in the state. The question is what is the cost of each of those to implement, and when does it match and marry up with when customers are using that very electricity that they need?
And a little bit of hydro, too.
And we do, yes, absolutely. Just outside of Georgetown, we have a very interesting facility that's called a pump storage facility that acts like a large storage device.
Right.
And allows us to really integrate the changes that we see as the wind is dying down as we're going from nighttime to daytime, or as you know, those monsoons that we have during the summers and then the cold fronts that we get through during the winter and the spring. It really helps us modulate and integrate more wind on the system here in Colorado. That's one of the great things that we've been able to do. Between that and the research that we've put in place, we've been the #1 wind provider in the country for the past 12 years. And that's really a remarkable thing and something that Coloradans can be really proud of.
That large battery consisting of a lake is called Cabin Creek, is it?
Cabin Creek, yes.
Cabin Creek. And that was very, very forward-looking in the sense that I think it was built in the 1950s and must have been planned in the 30s.
Yes, it was. And in fact, we received an award, the Edison Award, which is an international recognition for the creativity of that particular project. We're currently in the process of refurbishing a little bit of that project to make sure that it's available and ready for the long term, and also increasing the size so that we can produce more energy from it, so making the pond a little bit larger.
Before we talk about what you're going to build, just on Cabin Creek, it's an ingenious idea is simply to move the pond or the lake from one elevation to another elevation, and to move it at a point in time that electricity is plentiful and cheap.
That is correct.
And available and not needed for peak demand.
Yeah, so we use it to turn on whenever the wind is coming down, and we can move the energy from the upper pond to the lower pond to generate and offset what we need to make sure we can meet people getting up in the mornings and turning on their TVs, their heaters, their stoves and everything else. It lets us do that in the morning time and meet when the wind is coming off, and then in the evenings when the prices are low, we pump that water back up the hill again. So it's really using the mountains and the valuable resources that we have here in the state to our benefit.
And it's available instantaneously.
Yes, sir, it is.
What are you building?
Oh, we are looking at a number of different things. So the other one that we have is our Rush Creek Wind Project. It's a 600 megawatt wind project out on the eastern plains of Colorado. Crosses over a number of counties out there. And that is going to produce enough electricity to power many homes and takes us a further step. The best benefit about that particular project is it costs us close to $1 billion to build it, but it's going to still save our customers not only just the cost of that project going into rates, but it's going to reduce their rates by an incremental another $400 million over the life of the resource. And so that's a really big benefit, and that's because of those production tax credits that you were talking about, as well as the really good prices we were able to obtain on the resources by partnering with other businesses here in Colorado, just like Vestas, who builds the wind turbines. That's where the wind turbines are going to be sourced from and built and installed here in Colorado.
And that $400 to $500 million of savings is after the cost of the transmission lines.
After the cost of the transmission line, after the cost of the entire project itself. It's all in. A net savings for customers of around $400 million.
And you end up with, I think electricity is measured in terms of cost by kilowatt hour, if I recall correctly.
That is correct.
And, many years ago, I was involved with a startup company as a lawyer for the company, and you know, we were trying to push battery storage, and I've heard you speak on battery storage, but all the same, we were working on battery storage, and to get something as cheap as 3 cents a kilowatt hour is astounding.
Yes, and this particular resource is actually beating that. We're at, I believe it's 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour, and that's a really remarkable price. Well,
very good for that. And what will that, so we're about 20% now, and I don't know what the, is it capacity, but what the total capacity is. Will this bring the 20% up to a certain level that you know of, or?
Yeah, so the Rush Creek project alone will increase us to about 29% renewables on the system. And that's from an energy basis. But we have additional plans in place too. And that is we've made a filing with the Commission to consider what we're calling the Colorado Energy Plan. And what that would do is we're in the process right now with the Commission here in Colorado of evaluating our electric resource planning. And that looks at long-term, over at least 10 years, but all the way out to even 40 years. What are our needs in Colorado for electricity going to be? And for those first 10 years, what resources should we be looking at to build in order to make sure that we're maintaining what we need to for the system here? We put a plan, a modification to that electric resource plan before the Commission that would look at, if we can, we would close a couple of the coal facilities that we have down in the Pueblo area, and we would replace those with the renewables, provided that the customer bill would remain flat. And so that means that we are, moving forward with these new technologies and replacing them and implementing them on our system, meeting those needs that we were talking about of the customers that we were talking about before, and moving that process forward, which would put us at 55% renewables forecasted by 2026. That is the highest penetration of renewables, that we've had on any of our systems, and is beyond what many other states across the country are going to have.
I'm sorry, by what year?
2026.
And so what technological developments are necessary to allow that to occur?
Well, what we've been seeing is the wind and the solar resources that are available today are lower priced than what they were many years ago. You were mentioning storage and the research that you had done on it previously. That too has been coming down in price, dramatically probably from when you were doing the research on it before. But wind and solar have both come down significantly in the most recent past. And then in addition to that, we have the production tax credits and the investment tax credits that also lower that price even further, which are tax benefits that are provided at the federal level. But as you mentioned, some of those are starting to decrease, starting last year if you didn't do your safe harbor activities. And they decrease in steps. And then again, the investment tax credit will also be declining through the early 2020s.
Well, that's an amazing development just in terms of Rush Creek. Is that a certainty? I guess construction needs to start this year, doesn't it?
Construction is already underway. We received approval from the Commission, I guess it was November of last year, and so that one's in progress now.
So absent construction difficulties, that's a done deal?
Yes, sir. It will be online in October of 2018.
So interesting to hear all of these developments and eventual cost savings. We're talking with Alice Jackson, Vice President, Strategic Revenue Initiatives with Xcel Energy. Peter Moore is our co-host today. He's Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado. Stick with us. We'll have much more coming up after the break. thanks so much for staying with us today on Connect and Collaborate. We are connecting with Vital for Colorado. We have Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado, here helping us host today.
Well, thanks a lot, Tammy. Our guest is Alice Jackson, the Vice President for Strategic Revenue Initiatives for Xcel Energy. You talked about our energy future. Let's talk about our energy presence right now. So I see a couple charts in front of you. You probably know these figures precisely, but what is our current energy mix in Colorado for where we get our electricity?
Yeah, sure. So where the energy comes from now is primarily comprised of 29% of the energy comes from renewables, and 71% comes from natural gas and coal-fired generation, so base fossil fuel plants. Included in that natural gas component are facilities that are known as peaker plants, and those are combustion turbines that you turn on those really, really hot days during the summer when everybody turns on their air conditioning because it's hot.
Sweltering, yeah.
And they want to be a little bit cooler. And at the same time, all the manufacturing and the operations and businesses, keep going at the same time. So that really is when we have the highest consumption on our system.
And we say, I guess, combustion turbines are combusting natural gas.
Yes, they are.
And they take how long to get up to the level that they can deliver power to the system?
They're getting faster and faster. You'd be surprised at some of the technologies that have been developed, but some of the older ones, they'll take 15, 20 minutes. Nowadays, you can actually turn them on in 10 or less at times.
Well, I've just dated myself again. The last figure that I knew was 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, everything is getting faster and better.
Yeah.
I'd like to just really talk about the symbiotic nature, and that's my phrase, but it's the way I look at it, is that you can't really have an effective source of energy in terms of wind because of the variability, the intermittent nature of wind, without other backup sources to allow them to be sustainable, allow them to be useful, allow them to be on a system like yours, because if you didn't have backups, you wouldn't have it on your system, I imagine.
That's correct.
You couldn't.
That's right. So in order to integrate wind and its intermittency, because the wind only generates electricity when the wind is blowing.
Right.
And wind blows at a variety of intensities. We all know some days you walk outside and it's barely there. Other days you walk outside and, well, you probably need a hat for your hair.
That's all you notice.
There's kind of a similar issue, I think, with solar, too.
There is. The sun doesn't shine 24/7. And then if you add in
Except
our monsoons.
Except Sweden, though, it does.
Yes, I guess if you go far enough north, you might find a location that you could have solar all day long. But in lovely Colorado, while we have 300 days of sunshine a year, it is not a 24-hour-a-day type sunshine.
And the reason I'm really raising this issue, and I'd like to know further about, but many people would like the future to be now.
Right.
And many people would like to wave a wand and say, well, let's make it all renewable. And then the further extension of that, there are some people, not many rational people, but there are some people that I believe are trying to keep it in the ground. And they're trying to literally drive the oil and gas industry out of the state of Colorado, which I think would have a devastating effect on the economy for Colorado, probably put the state into a recession. Like nobody's seen, actually. You take $31 billion, it can be turned off that quickly if it's become that unfavorable. But it's not that way in the real world. And from a utilities point of view, why don't you tell us how you think, I guess, about the various sources of energy and how one supports the other and how all of them are needed?
Yeah, I think the words you used before, that symbiotic relationship, is something that is still very necessary on our system, and long term we think is going to be necessary as well. When the wind stops blowing, you need to have another resource because people aren't going to want to turn off their goods and services or their comfort in their home if it's not available. So you have to have something that's going to step in at that point in time. And what I would say is a lot of people will say, well, in the future that's going to be storage, right? And storage is going to close the gap. It's not necessarily the case. The duration, storage doesn't generate electricity. It returns what it has received, and it returns less than it's received. And that's getting better too. The technology is advancing, and we're seeing solutions there. But at the end of the day, solar during the day, the wind primarily blows for us during the night. You still have spaces between, and then you also have series of days in the spring and during the summer that aren't going to have enough electricity generated from those resources on the system in order to close those gaps either. So it is essential for us to have these other types of backup resources, or other system resources, I should say. They're not even backup, because a lot of times they still are base load. But in order for those to step in and to make sure that you have the high reliability that that our customers are looking for, and being able to maintain their lives long term.
You know, people don't realize this, but I know it from the work that Vital for Colorado does, and just talked to lots of people. One of the biggest support groups for the natural gas industry is actually the solar industry, because the people in the solar industry realize that without the natural gas power plants, their source of energy would not be sustainable on a utility level grid.
That's correct, and there really is that need for both of them to be there, and for us to figure out how to increasingly incorporate other resources, but make sure that at the same time we can provide that high level of reliability that everybody has become accustomed to.
In terms of the progress that Colorado has made, it wasn't too long ago that I think that the base load was actually over 60% for coal.
That's correct.
And in 2016, you told us it was 46% and 25% is natural gas. And
Right.
Those are the two components, the 71% that are hydrocarbons. But it is amazing, actually, how quickly it's changed.
It is, and back in 2010 here in Colorado, the legislature passed the Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act, which what that did is it made us go through a process of evaluating which of those facilities we should close versus which of them we should install advanced cleaning and environmental controls on, so that we could continue running those through the end of their useful life. And that process is what had us retiring over 600 megawatts of coal at that point in time. So that's why you see that significant shift from the number that you recall to where we are today, because we have successfully completed that. That was another close to $1 billion project that we completed for customers, and rates went up no more than 1%. So that's another example of how we've managed that transition through time.
And I don't want to get into politics. I know that your position, especially being a vice president over an 8-state region, and I won't name names, but you don't really need to have the politicians tell you where you ought to go. You're going that anyway through market forces, it appears to me.
So we pay very close attention to what the economics are of these resources, and if they make a lot of sense for our customers, we're going to proceed down that path. With the support and the approval and oversight of the Regulatory Commission here in Colorado, that is really where we take those proposals and they evaluate them for whether or not they are good for customers. Sometimes they tell us no, sometimes they say yes. And so the legislature, you know, I think they can learn a lot from what we've been doing at the commission, and the process and the progress we've made in here in Colorado has been tremendous. They, however, are good partners on other things. Clean Air, Clean Jobs is an example of where, you know, they took a bold step forward, and we had to work there. But as far as advancing a renewable portfolio standard here in Colorado, you know what, we have surpassed it, and we are continuing to go down that path as exhibited by the Colorado Energy Plan that we talked about earlier. And we are moving faster and faster because it is the right decision for our customers economically.
Well, good job of bypassing the bulk of my question. And I'll just say that you're making the politicians look good, is that you're reaching goals that they promise that they're going to achieve, and their information is not as current as yours. You're exceeding those goals, it seems to me.
We are exceeding the goals that have been put before us, and we continue to press further for the state of Colorado.
What's a smart meter?
A smart meter is a meter that can be installed at a customer's home that allows not only the utility to read it on a more frequent basis than just once a month, but it also passes information and makes it available to the customer. So anybody who has like an Alexa device or a Google Home device in their home, they can ask the question, how many kilowatt hours did I use today? Now, I don't know how many customers might actually ask that question, but they could.
Well, to set up our next segment, my first question, you need smart meters in order to change rate structures, don't you?
Yes, sir, we do.
Interesting, and I think I've heard of somebody who has noticed their rates in that exact method. We'll be back with more with Alice Jackson, Vice President of Strategic Review Initiatives with Xcel Energy, along with Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado. Stick with us. We're so glad you're sticking with us today here on Connect and Collaborate as we're connecting with Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado, and his guest, Alice Jackson, Vice President, Strategic Review Initiatives for Xcel Energy. And Peter, thanks so much for being with us today and helping host the show.
Alice, we ended the last segment by asking about smart meters, and you explained a little bit about what they do. I guess 2 or 3 questions on that. I guess what is necessary to increase the deployment of smart meters, and what ultimately can they allow Xcel to do that would be beneficial to the consumers?
Yeah, so first off, let's start with, we don't have any smart meters on our system right now.
Right.
The way that we read all of, well, I should say our residential customers and small commercial customers' meters, it's called an automatic or an automated meter reading system.
Right.
We drive a car around,
Right.
and that car then pings that meter that's sitting on your home or sitting on your business, and it wakes up and it sends how much electricity you used in the past month.
So little radios on the meters right now.
You got it. Yeah, so it sends a radio signal back. What smart meters do is smart meters have many more capabilities, not only to read your energy, but also the demand. It also reads it more than once a month. You can set it to read every 5 minutes. You can set it to read every hour so that you can have more creative ways of showing customers the pricing and making them more aware of how, when they consume electricity, it actually drives costs across the system.
And if people want to know what the real cost or real expense is, you have the opportunity to change their habits to the good.
That's right.
For all.
So right now, the way that we bill our residential customers, if you were to take out your bill and look at it, you'll see that there is a $1 per kilowatt hour rate that's multiplied by the number of kilowatt hours that you have consumed in the month, and it gives you a dollar amount that you pay. And that kilowatt hour dollar amount, the $1 per kilowatt hour amount, doesn't change whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning on a holiday or it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a summer day, weekday.
But with smart meters, you would have the opportunity, it would seem to me, to charge, to, I guess, reward consumers for using electricity intelligently.
I would put it a slightly different way, Peter. The way that I would look at it is we have the opportunity to give the customers the option of making choices on their consumption based off of the pricing. So if they choose, if say it's the middle of the day and it's really hot and we're having to run every single generation resource on our system, and those combustion turbines we talked about before are the higher costing resources on the system, then that is going to drive the cost, and they would have the opportunity of avoiding that if they could then either defer, shift, or not consume during that period of time.
And my assumption was that people would choose to save money, but I can see that they may not choose that.
That's right. It all depends on where you are in your life and what's going on at your home or business at that point in time.
In order to do that, though, you need your regulator, the Public Utilities Commission, to permit rate changes, a different rate structure, wouldn't you?
Yes, we would. And so what we would be responsible for doing is we would put together the proposal. We would take it to the Public Utilities Commission here in Colorado and present it to them. A variety of parties are allowed to intervene into our cases that we present to the Commission to look at it from their perspective and provide feedback. And ultimately, the Commission makes a decision, whether it's what we originally proposed or it's something modified or not at all. That is how we interact with the Commission to make sure that we're all making the best decisions for the public and the greater good.
So people may not appreciate that Xcel is a highly regulated industry, and you can't make changes without the approval of the Commission. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes. I spent 7 years inside of Xcel running various regulatory departments, first down in Texas and New Mexico, and then I've had the pleasure of running the one here in Colorado for about 4 years. And what people don't realize is that when we go in to change rates, so the amount that we charge our customers, then that takes about 11,000 pages of documents.
Wow.
That we have to assemble. It takes at least 6 months to put that together, and then we go through a year-long process of review at the Commission on going, is this the right way for us to be assessing the costs? How much should we be assessing? In what manner does it get presented to the customer?
And how many PUC commissioners are there?
There are 3 PUC commissioners here in Colorado.
And where do they come from?
They're appointed by the governor, and right now we have a variety of locations that they've come from in backgrounds. One of them, my understanding is her background is from the Pueblo area, and the other 2 generally the Denver area.
And the person from Pueblo is also a lawyer, very prominent and successful trial lawyer also.
That is my understanding, yes.
Yeah, that's true. And how have the three PUC commissioners over time traditionally reacted to cases brought by Xcel?
Well, the charge of the Public Utilities Commission is to maintain the public interest. And what that means is they have to balance a scale. They have a really tough job because what they have to do is, because we're a regulated monopoly, they have to make sure that we stay healthy enough that we can provide the electricity that we're providing. And we have people that invest in us so that we can build the infrastructure that is necessary to be able to do so. So they have to make sure that we maintain credit ratings, because if you have a poor credit rating, your debt cost goes up, which would increase the cost for customers. So it's a real scale to what is the overall cost to the customer. So their difficult job is to maintain that public interest of what's in the best interest of the company versus what is in the best interest of customers, and find that middle ground. And so the reaction I would say we generally receive is they do a thorough analysis of anything that we bring forward. They open miscellaneous dockets or investigatory dockets when new topics come up, like electric vehicles is a perfect example of one of the topics that they're looking into right now. Storage is another one that they've asked us questions about. Transmission building long-term across our state on how do you access the renewable resources, how do you make sure we have enough capacity that we can move around our system. So all of those things come into a very complex oversight. And remember, these PUC commissioners are not only doing the electric side of the business, they're also regulating the gas side of the business, as well as taxis and other industries here in the state. So they have quite a heavy lift.
They do. You know, in the few minutes they have left, one of the emerging technologies that, in my mind, is accelerating so quickly and is coming to the marketplace much faster than people anticipated are electric cars. And it seems like everybody's talking about electric cars, people are talking about autonomous electric cars. And then I started thinking about all the electric cars getting together and getting home and charging at the same time. And let's say that it's 7 o'clock at night and the entire system is set up for that not to be a peak load time. So what happens?
Well, you would be surprised. Depending upon where they go with the fast chargers and the intensity that comes, because that draws electricity, essentially makes the straw bigger. It pulls in more electricity all at once to that home. Those, you might face some, long term, if you had a lot of those, you may have to stagger a little bit. But what we're looking at is, because charging for customers, if you can send them the right price signal and say, okay, the off-peak time. So let's not charge at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a hot summer day. Let's make sure you're charging after 7 o'clock, between 7 o'clock and say 6 a.m. When people start waking up and starting all of their electricity intensive activities again. That is not going to be much of a problem. In addition to the fact that we have something that we talk about called use per customer. Use per customer is how much do you use as an average customer in your home. And that's declining. If you think about it, the intensity of your television and the consumption of the energy in your television is going down. So every time somebody buys a new one, it goes down. Same with your refrigerator.
Of efficiency.
You got it. And so as the efficiencies are coming down, even if you add those electric vehicles for the personal driving ones, it's not going to make a huge difference, at least not in the next decade. And we'll be able to handle it on the system just fine.
But from a software engineer point of view, you could also handle it through software and have the software just decide when to charge it and have the electrical company tell it when to charge.
And we can absolutely send some of those price signals. We are looking at technologies long term on where that might go, how you would integrate that. How would you maybe put a storage device? So if you have a neighborhood that's intense on, with electric vehicles, maybe put some storage devices there so you could charge it together. So there are different solutions you can put together on these. It's a matter of how do you solve each of those problems as they come up, and we're taking a very close look long term at what that might look like.
But in order for that to happen, you need to have smart meters, right?
Yes, sir.
And then, and once you have smart meters, then you now need to have the PUC permit differing rate structures in order for you to send rate signals to customers.
And that absolutely is an ongoing conversation we are having here in Colorado. In fact, for customers that are residential customers of Xcel Energy in the Colorado Service Territory, they have a prime opportunity right now to sign up for 2 pilots that we have ongoing. One is for a time of use energy only rate. The other is for a time of use demand rate. And that will really help give us feedback on those future rate designs, which we'll take back to the Commission in 2019 to have a very robust conversation again about what should we be using as the price presentation to customers in Colorado.
Well, I think that That will be necessary because I think the electric cars will come faster than anybody anticipates. If you look at the developments last year or two, it's really astounding. And so I think we need to have more smart meters and the ability of the utility to send price signals to the consumers.
Yeah, and we look forward to that future case, and we're also looking forward to working with the cities and communities on more of the mass transit electrification, because we do think that there are some great opportunities for our communities to do that as well.
And where should our listeners go to learn about the work of Xcel?
You can go to our website, which is xcelenergy.com. There's all kinds of information out there. I would also point them to their programs and rebates for the energy efficiency items we were talking about before, as well as they can always go to the Public Utilities Commission website and pull down any of the filings that we've made. They are public. There are a lot of pages, as I mentioned before, to some of those, but if you really like to have some bedtime reading, there's some great stuff in there.
And thanks so much, Peter Moore, Chairman and CEO of Vital for Colorado. Thanks for listening today.